All right, welcome back. So in the last one, we ended up setting up this little Discord API interface that looks and checks what the Discord user's information is. Then we take the information and we store it inside of the database. So at this point in time, there are three different cases that we have here. This first case means that there's no data inside of the database, so we create our first user. This second case is there is accounts in the server, but we did not find a matching ID, so then we register a user. And then down here, this is an existing account. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a simple function down here. And we're going to call this login. And inside of this, we're going to pass the ID that the database uses. So we have player and then the ID that's going to be inside of the database. And the ID that we get is going to be based on one of these results here. So if we actually scroll up a little bit, we will find, hopefully, a reference to this. And somewhere in here, oh, it looks like we don't have it. Hold on. Let me double check. Oh, we do. It's right here. All right. So when we get a result back, we usually receive a Discord variable and an ID variable. And with this ID variable, we can take it and send it through login. So if we do login res.id, and the first parameter is actually going to be player, that should work fine. And we're going to go ahead and copy this, paste it right here for the console log on the upsert here. And then the final one is down here. And we're just going to do login player. And then this one is actually going to be account.id, just like that. Now inside, we can verify that this is working correctly. We can do a console log on the ID, and we can do a console log on player.name. So we're going to go ahead and rerun our server here to make sure this function works just as we intend it. We're going to reconnect. We're going to wait for the text here to clear so we can see it. And it's now cleared. I'm going to hit login. And as you can see, we've got the username of stuck and 1. Perfect. So what is our next task? Our next task is actually checking to see if a character exists for this GUID. And the way that we can do that is we look at the entities, okay? And we have something called character here. So this is our character table. It has an ID. This is automatically generated, but it also has a GUID. And the GUID is what we will compare to see if a player exists. So at this point in time, this user does not have a character. And in order to create that character, we need to do a DB select data. We're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go ahead and put this down here. And we're going to call this one character. And we're going to select ID and GUID. Okay? And what we're going to do is try to find out if this user even exists. So the first use case, I mean, this is very similar to registration, but this is the additional step we're taking here. So the first use case is that the user doesn't have an account, or in the database doesn't have any accounts. So this is what this is. So we're going to do the same thing as above. We're going to do character. This Discord data ID is not going to be that. It's actually going to be upsert for GUID. And then we're going to pass the ID here. Okay. And when we get it back, we don't want it to log in. At this point, we want it to finish login. Okay. And then we're going to get the data back. So we're going to do player data. Okay. Or not player data. I'm sorry. We're going to do player and then res. All right. So the first case is now handled. Let's look at the second case. The second case is the character that we're trying to find. So we're going to rename this so it makes a little more sense. So this is going to be character. And then we're going to look for character GUID equals the ID that was passed to us. And we're going to surround this in a string, just in case, because we want to make sure that both of these are strings. And if it is successful in finding it, we will return the character, and then we now have character. So if this character does not exist inside of our list of characters, then that means that we need to create the character for them. So if I paste this here, character, res, GUID, that should automatically do it for us. And the final instance is down here at the bottom. We will have finish login, and then the data that we're going to need. But there is one issue with this, and I'm already seeing this before we're getting any further into this. When we go to look up this user ID for the character, we're only looking up ID and GUID. We're only selecting 2 columns. So if we want all of the columns, we need to do something else. So what we're going to do instead, we're going to do fetch all by field. Okay, so we're going to change this to fetch all by field. And this is going to be for the GUID field. And then we're going to look for the database ID. So this is going to be looking for ID, which is what that is. And we're going to be looking in the character section, and then it's going to return us a list of data. Now, instead of this being data undefined, we're going to check if it's an array. So array is array, okay? And this data that we were receiving, if it's an array, we're going to check the length of it. So if data length is greater than or equal to 1, that means that this person has an account. So this is a much simpler way to handle this section, okay? And if we're looking for specifically just this data here, we can finish login by doing player and then passing data 0, because that is going to be the first item that we find. And if we don't find anything, then this is where we set up our character. So all this stuff right here is actually now obsolete. We don't even need to do any of this. Well, some of this actually. So we'll copy this and then we'll remove all this. So I just went through and we just went through and refactored this because there's just a better design pattern here that we can use, and that'll save us a lot of unnecessary lookups, so to speak. So now when it's found, we go to finish login. And if it's not found, we insert new data for the player, and then we finish off by sending that data over to finish login. And we're going to call this, we're going to make a function, call it finish login player. And then this is going to be the data that's being passed to them. Okay. And we're going to do console log player and then console log data. All right. So let's go ahead and try and see what comes up out of this test that we are performing. So we're going to do a reconnect. There we go. We're going to hit login. And as you can see, we have a GUID of 1, a position of null, and an ID of 1. So now we know exactly what the player has for their data. So we're going to store that. We're going to do player data equals data. So now this is stored on top of the player, and it will be accessible anywhere inside of this one resource here for example. Okay, so now we have all that data there, and it's stored on top of the player. So what do we want to do if the position is null? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at if player data position is not defined, we need to determine where we are going to spawn this player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up a coordinate. So we're going to look up GTA 5 coordinate locations again, and we're going to determine where we're going to put these players. Some GTA 5 coordinates, sure. Give me one moment. Looks like some of this stuff isn't loading right now, so okay. So we're going to spawn them at the Richmond Hotel. That sounds fine. Okay, so we're going to use that. So if they're null, like this, then we need to, for one, spawn the player. So we're going to do player spawn. And then we're going to set their location. So this is going to be an X, Y, and Z parameter. So we're going to do negative 1330, 911, 340, 871. And the final one is going to be 64078. And we're going to instantly spawn them. And on top of that, we're also going to assign them a model as well. So we'll do player model equals, and then it's npm free mode, I think 01. Let me check before I just put all my money on that. npm free mode 01. Yes, we're correct. Perfect. So now we have this set up. They will be spawned here. And there we go. So let's go ahead and test that to make sure they spawn in that location when they log in. So we'll do a reconnect. And we'll hit login. And it spawned us at the hotel. So what does that mean now? Now we need to turn off this login menu the moment that we begin processing their data or logging them in, for instance. So we need to emit something down to the client side. So we're going to do alt emit client, we're going to do player, and we're going to do Discord, and then we're going to do close, just like that. And we're going to take and receive this event on the client side. So if we go over to panels, Discord, we're going to add an alt on server event here. We're going to intercept this specific name. So I'm going to comment that function in right here. Copy this right here. There we go. So now when we receive this event, we're going to process it. And to process it, we're going to check if WebView is not defined, then we're just going to return. But if it is defined, we need to destroy that web view. So we're going to do web view destroy, and then we're going to do alt show cursor false. Perfect. So now we have a way to close this menu once it's been loaded. And our final step is what I promised in the beginning, is that we will be storing the user's location each time that they log out. So in order to do that, we need an additional event. So I'm going to make a folder and we're going to call this events. And inside of events, we're going to make player disconnect. Okay, and this is going to have an MJS extension as well. Forgot to write that. So we're going to take a look at the events here. One sec. So we're going to do player disconnect. All right, so we're going to import all as alt from alt. And we're going to need that SQL little connector here. So let's go ahead and copy that up there at the top. I'm going to paste it right in here. Then we're going to do const db equals new SQL. And we want to load player disconnect inside of here. So if we do import, and we're going to take a look at the paths, it's going to be events, player, disconnect, MJS. All right, so now that'll load when it's ready. And the only other thing we need is when the player disconnects, so we're going to do alt on, player disconnect, it's going to pass us a player. And with this player, we need to save some data. And what data we're going to save is going to be the user's last location. So if we do db, and I believe it's save by field, but let me just double check here. Save by, nope, I guess not, field. We're going to have to look for it. Let's see. It's not insert, update partial data. I believe is the one that we'll be using here. Yes. So we're going to be using update partial data. So the first thing that we're going to pass is the player's identification for their document. And because we stored it on the player, if you look down here, when we finish the login, player.data, right? So we're going to do player data ID, and then we're going to determine what object we are going to update. So this is a little tricky. And the basic idea is it only updates a specific field, only the field that you tell it to update. And the best way that I can explain this is we need to make an object, okay? And the first parameter inside of it is going to be the field name. And the field name that we are updating here is called POS, if I'm not mistaken. So let's go look at our character. Nope, it's called position. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do position, and then we need to give it the data that it should update. So we're going to do JSON stringify, and then we're going to stringify the player's position. So if we do player.pos, this will store the player's position as text in our database. And then the next step here is it needs to go into the character repo, and then the callback will get like a res or something like that. So here we are saving the player's data, or at least their position at least. And when we do that, we need to load this position when it's not null. So if we take a look at our Discord panel, you'll see that on finished login, we will see that we are spawning the model, or we're giving it a model and we're spawning the player. So let's move this model outside of here, of this if statement. So this is only when the position is not defined. If it is defined, then we need to parse that. So we're going to do const POS equals JSON parse player data position. So now we have a vector3 that we can work with that we stored inside of the database. So if we do player.spawn, and then we do POS X, POS Y, and then POS Z with a delay of 0, that will spawn us in the last location that we were in. So let me demonstrate that for you. So if we go ahead and log into the server after we reconnect here, let's wait for the text to load. There it is. All right, so when we hit login, it's going to log us in, set us in this position here, and then we're going to take a stroll down over this way. All right, so we're right next to this, what looks like a jacuzzi, and we're going to stop right here, hit F8, and we're going to do reconnect. And down here in the server, you'll notice something. It says saved player data. So now that we've reconnected, let's go ahead and hit login again. And as you can see, it put us in that position. So now we have a fully functioning login system that saves our user's location. So that is the beginning of what you can do with this database structure. Now, obviously, we can make some improvements on something like this, or when we're saving data, something like this. This is a little bit inefficient, so we'll be covering some other ways we can handle player data here in the future. So in that regard, thank you for watching this one, and we'll head into some more complicated database management after this one.